Hello, let's talk about frame rate optimization in Apex Legends. Just a quick heads up, everything I'm talking about, all the information that you're going to be inputting into different files and the launch options and such, I will put a Reddit link down in the description. So if you want to copy paste, just head there and it will be much easier than trying to type everything that you see on the monitor. Here we have a clean install of Apex Legends, just to show the in-game settings. I have a GTX 1080 Ti and an i7 6700, so most of these settings are almost maxed out. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn off VSync, because you never want VSync on, it introduces input lag. Other than that, most of these are all put to very high or close to the highest. So let's see what kind of FPS I get. You should test it in real games, because in the training mode you always get higher FPS and you want to optimize for what you're actually going to be getting in game. So just standing here at the edge, we get around 140 FPS and 7 or 8 milliseconds, sometimes up to 9 milliseconds of frame time. So this is what we're going to look to improve. Step 1 here is looking at the video settings, and basically I want everything to be turned all the way down or disabled. And the only thing I leave on is the texture streaming budget, since that doesn't affect the actual gameplay, I've noticed. And let's see where that has brought us. Now we have around 180, 190 FPS. So just from those simple settings we gained around 40 FPS or 50 FPS or so. But we can still improve on that. Open up Origin, go to your game library, Apex, click on the cogwheel, and game properties, advanced launch options. Right here you want to input some options. I'll talk more about this one in the next step, but now while recording I will remove this command. It just gives you another FPS graph, and I already have another program that does that for me. This command used to unlimit your FPS, but since the latest patch, FPS doesn't go above 300 no matter what you do. This command just makes sure that the game always starts in full screen mode. I had some issues that it would start in windowed mode sometimes, but this fixes that. NoVid removes any intro videos. Some people are experiencing issues when they have NoVid on, but it works for me. Force no VSync, and make sure that the game can't use VSync. So we don't want VSync, so why not start the game to see where that has brought us. As you can see, we're still at the same FPS, so this doesn't actually improve performance. These are just some nice things to have. Now we want to talk some more about this part, the exec, auto exec. What this means is that the game will run a file called autoexec at start and use the settings that you input there. So let's just bring the folder over here. You want to go to your PC and then the drive you have the game installed in. Go to Apex, the CFG folder, and right here you want to create a new document called autoexec.cfg. In that file you want to have FPS max. Again, this doesn't do anything. It used to give you uncapped FPS, but might as well have it in there. CL ragdoll collide turns off ragdolls. Matte compressed textures will use compressed textures. And CL force preload, I'm not quite sure, but well, Apex is made in the source engine, and I know that if you turn this to 1 in games like CSGO, it will give you some massive stuttering. So you can leave this whole command out, or you can force it to 0. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, nice to have. So save that, have it in this folder again. Let's start up the game, see where that brings us. So we've gained about 5 FPS or so. Not much, but it's something at least. So let's continue on, making some other changes to improve that even further. You can close this folder, we're done there. What we want to do now is go to your C drive, users, your username, saved games, respawn, apex, local. In here you should have a file called videoconfig.txt. Should look something like this. What we're going to do is we're just going to change some values from 0s to 1s, etc. I already have a file where I've done all those changes, but it should look like this. So the changes I've made are in here. Ragdoll self-collision, turn that to a 0 from a 1. Settings, matte depth feather, turn that from a 1 to a 0. This turns off ragdolls. This turns up the depth of field effect when you aim. This is the level of detail scale. Basically means how far away you have to be before something loads the high quality textures. Lower values mean that you have to be closer to the items. I believe that around 0.6 or 0.8 is normal, but you can move down to 0.35 without any problems. And then setting CSM enabled, turn that from a 1 to a 0. This will turn off all shadows. It will give you quite a bit of an FPS boost, but of course you won't have any shadows. So for instance, if someone flies above your head, you won't see their shadows on the ground. Personal preference, but it will give you a big FPS boost. And now you have to right click, properties, turn it to read only, otherwise the game will overwrite whatever changes you have made there. Then we can close that, open up the game again. And now we're sitting at around 220, 230, yeah, more around 230 FPS. So that was like a 40 FPS boost, which is huge. But we still have some ways to go. Because right now, if I'm just standing still here, we have 230, or maybe even up to 235 FPS. But if we go down right here, oh look, we're up to 250. And if I just like look straight into this, we're sitting at almost a cap at 300. You can see that it changes a lot from like 230 all the way to 300 depending on where you are. I'm just going to get a thermal grenade to make sure, check what kind of FPS we get with that.
Strong work. Grab your supplies.
Now we're down to like 170, 168. So 260, looking straight into a thermal grenade, and we're down to 160. So yeah, there's quite a big range, like 100 FPS. So what we're going to do now is install a program called Riva Tuner Statistics Server. If you have ever installed, for instance, MSI Afterburner, this program comes bundled with that. But when you start it, you won't have any of these profiles, you will just have the global profile. What we will do here is press the green add button, go into wherever you have your games installed, find the r5apex.exe file and click open or add. That will give you a profile specifically for that exe file. And what you can do in this program is introduce a frame rate limiter, and you also get this big on-screen display for your FPS. I just have it really high now so you see my FPS easier. So what we want to do is we want to remove that big variance in the game, going from like 300 FPS if you're inside staring at the wall to 170 FPS if you're standing right on top of a thermal grenade. We want to bring that more into a stable line because as you saw, the graph under the FPS went up and down a lot. That means that there's a big variation between how long the computer takes to render each frame. And if you have a big variation and it's moving up and down a lot, that will make the game feel unresponsive or a bit sluggish even at sometimes, even if you have, like I had over 160 FPS, but the game still felt a bit more sluggish when standing next to grenades, for instance, instead of when I was just running around looting indoors. So this is very, very, very dependent on your system, but what you want to do is you want to, after you have added the R5 Apex, you want to go into setup and make sure display integer frame rate is on and enable frame time history overlay. Frame time is the time in milliseconds between every frame, and then you want to make sure you have enable frame rate limiter. And now I had it on 0, which it will be when you start it too, because that means the frame rate is uncapped and you can see what is the highest your computer will go to and what is the lowest your computer will go to. And like we saw, I was sitting at around 230, 240 FPS when I was just running around doing the normal stuff. So let's try and change this frame rate limiter to 230. And I will open up Apex again. Also here, make sure show own statistics is on and on-screen display support is on. This will make sure that you get your FPS number and the graph, this graph right here with the frame times. What we want to do is make the whole graph look like this straight line, because that means that every frame takes equally long time to render and there's no big difference in how long frames take to render for the computer.
Welcome to Apex Legends.
So, like I said, I set the frame rate limiter to 230, so the FPS is 228, 229, but never above 230. The reason why we want to use this third-party program is because there is no FPS limiter in Apex. Like nowhere here in the video settings there are no FPS limiters. So even if the game had one, there may be some input lag if you use it. It really depends a lot on the game, and with the RivaTuner statistics server you can use the same program for every game and be sure that it works and only introduces one frame of input lag, which is very fine. Right, so as we can see now, we're not quite hitting the cap. There are still a lot of small wiggles on this line. But if I go and look into the wall, you can see 230 FPS and a straight line. So each frame is taking exactly 4.3 milliseconds to render. But if I go around here, you will see a lot of small hitches again. And what we do then is we reduce this frame rate limiter a bit, move it to perhaps 220, see where that gets us. Alright, it's a bit better, but there are still some hitches. But it's looking much more smooth now. I'll just do a bit of the tutorial here. And like I said in the beginning, the tutorial area is such a small place that you get a lot higher FPS here than you get in the real game. So again, go drop solo somewhere and try this out, or just play regular games and do some testing on your own.
Follow the checklist to access and cycle through your inventory.
So there's still some hitching here, and it will probably get worse when I throw this grenade. Yeah, and now we're getting like 205, 210 FPS. So just to make really sure that the frame rate barely never goes under our limit, I'll put it to 200. That should be fine for this test. So now only when we have a thermal grenade out and we're really close to it, we drop below the limit. Otherwise, whatever we do, it's fine.
Just upstairs. 1 second.
Like, it's barely noticeable, except for when you pull out the thermal grenades and such. So now, when I'm aiming,
Slaughter as many targets as you wish.
you still get some hitching. So we probably should lower the cap a bit more even. Yeah, I probably want to lower this even a bit more, perhaps to 190. And now we see we have a completely straight line here. No matter if I'm like moving around my aim a whole lot or if I'm just staring down here. The only thing that's probably going to give it a bit of a struggle is when I throw grenades. But then again, look, when that grenade went off, nothing happened. Perhaps when I throw a thermal. No, not even when I throw the thermal. So this is exactly what we're after. No matter what you're doing, you will always get above the capped FPS. So you will always have exactly the same constant rate. So you won't get any of that annoying thing where you think you have a fine FPS and then you get into a firefight and all of a sudden everything feels a lot slower than usual and you can't hit your shots because all of a sudden your shots really are not connecting like they should. And look, when I zoom in, I get bits of a small hitch right when I zoom in, but when I am actually zoomed in, I have a perfect FPS again. So this is probably fine, but then again, we're in training mode, so I'm probably going to start playing some real games on this cap and see where that gets me. I think we were at like 130, 140 FPS in the beginning, and that was very unstable even then. If I would have ran around and done these things like throw grenades and such, we would have probably gone under 100 FPS. So hopefully you get a better gaming experience, just like I did. I almost forgot to mention. And once you have found your preferred settings, you can, I like to make this the smallest, and then so you only have a tiny FPS indicator up in the top left. And then I disable the frame time history overlay, so I only get the FPS number and not that line. Or you can disable show own statistics, and it will not use this FPS counter, but it will instead use, if we go into advanced launch options and add back the CL show FPS 4 command, it will show another kind of FPS counter, one that is built into the game.